Okay. Good morning and welcome to Eyes on Books. I'm Fran Conroy and I'm working with Jonathan Williams today to discuss the book Combat Love by Alison Camerata. The name may sound familiar since she's worked with Fox News, CNN News, and most importantly, she worked with America's Most Wanted. So, Jonathan, let's get down to this book before we speak with Alison.
Fran, I have to tell you a story.
Okay.
I agreed to be a co-host and interview the author, and then I thought, I'm just too busy. I don't have time to read the book. But I said, before I do, I've got to try it. I started the book and I couldn't put it down. It was so interesting. It was hard to imagine. This is the story of a girl. I mean, most of the book takes place in her growing up years. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting. I'm going to start a little bit of information about the author, a little biography. So, she was born in 1966, so she's 57 years old. She was born in Shrewsbury, New Jersey. And that's not far from the coast. I looked it up on the map because the coast and the ocean play an important role in her life. She was always interested in broadcasting. As an early age, she enjoyed TV and she would imagine herself on TV and even doing interviews. Her career took off. Yes, please.
I was going to say, that was her magical world.
Yes.
Because that's all she wanted to do, and that was her enjoyment in life, because her structured, her background as a child was not that structured. So her way of escaping some of the situations that were around her was to picture herself as an interviewer on TV, and that's what she wanted to be.
That's what she wanted to be. She got a degree from American University in journalism, and then she went on to join the team at America's Most Wanted. She was the person in the field pursuing criminals, and she actually was involved in the capture of some significant criminals, which is quite an adventure. She did that for a number of years. After that, she joined Fox News. She was there for 16 years. And she moved over to CNN after some disagreements and differences of opinion.
Right.
Okay.
But let's back up a little bit to when she was younger.
Well, we're going to get there. Let me just finish the last part of her story. So she wrote a novel to begin with, called Amanda Wakes Up. And that's a story that is an account of a news reporter. So it's somewhat autobiographical, but it's really a novel. Following that, she wrote Combat Love, which is a memoir.
Right. But the thing that you didn't mention was she went to college on scholarships.
True.
She had no money, she had nothing to fall back on, but she knew that she wanted to be this reporter and a writer, and her mother gave her 5 rules to live by, and one of them was to get an education, to be an educated woman. Her mother was a very educated woman, had a doctorate in the arts. However, she wasn't the type of mother that stayed home and took care of her kids.
No.
And the story goes on. I'm surprised, to be honest with you, that she achieved her goals, that she could go to college, that she survived her childhood. At 11 years old, she was already sneaking out of the house to listen to punk rock bands till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and her mom didn't even know she was gone.
Yeah.
You know, it was a non-structured childhood that nowadays, I would think, she wouldn't have made it.
I'm a father of 3 daughters. What she went through is unimaginable to me.
I know.
It's unlike anything I experienced. I had a very conventional growing up, certainly some years before, but very conventional and almost normal, if I may say. her upbringing was so different.
I know.
From the time from 11 till about 16, her life, she was on her own at 16.
Oh, yes.
It's remarkable what she
Yep.
went through, what she did.
The fact that the mother at 11 years old wanted to take her to family planning to put her on birth control pills was something I wouldn't do with my daughter.
I'll tell you another aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, it just, the love was there, but it wasn't readily exposed to her. That's the best way I could put it. The mother
And
was
she
more
needed
interested
it,
in her
yeah.
life.
And she needed that. She
right.
needed that structure.
Right.
And she found it in a group of friends.
Right.
And especially a group of friends and devoted fans of a band called Shrapnel. Now, I'd never heard of Shrapnel. It's,
know,
it's a
it's
punk
before
rock
our
band.
time.
Okay, it's a punk rock band. I've never listened to punk rock music in my life. But I was intrigued. So I went to YouTube and I looked it up and listened to, their music is kind of interesting. It's very musical and very listenable. So I enjoyed some of the music, remarkably.
Did you see their outfits? They were in
Yes.
combat outfits, and they
Yes.
came out with guns on the stage,
Yes.
the lead singer. And that's who she had a crush on, the lead singer.
Yes.
And when she told her mother that, her mother says, well, birth control pills, we don't want any unnecessaries around. But I just felt if this was a child growing up today, this child would not make it. She went into people's homes and strangers' homes, lived in basements, slept in cars. I mean, we have, unfortunately, people doing that now, but not at 13 years old or 14 years old. She was skipping school. I mean, I'm surprised
she was
got her
also very successful in
education.
school.
That's right.
She was very successful in school. I got
She
a
was
scholarship.
I know. That's what put her through college.
That's right.
It's very hard. This is a very intriguing, very intriguing book. That's my OCD. It has to be neat. Very intriguing book in a way. She was very honest and open about her family life and her situation and how she felt due to that family situation growing up and her insecurity even being around her husband. She didn't want to get married. She saw what her mother went through with the divorces and the men and moving from one end of the country to another and not having any friends in the middle of school.
Yeah, but let's talk for a minute about what makes the book as readable as it is. It's, on the one hand, it sounds very intriguing. It sounds, oh, I wonder what that's like. I'd like to sort of learn more about a girl growing up like that. But on the other hand, I found it enormously interesting and entertaining to read. I'll tell you why. You've got to realize this woman is a very gifted reporter.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. She has a gift for visual storytelling. She has a remarkable facility for dialogue and interviewing and catching what people are saying, the back and forth. She captures that. And also, I noticed the book is written in a style that reminds me of a good news story. It has headlines. It has leads that take you into the story.
But it also has a follow-up, which a lot of the news today doesn't. The news will broadcast something radical, and then they never follow up and tell you what the results are, where this book has the news caption and the follow-up and the conclusion.
And she gives us the details.
Right.
Now, you understand, I have no familiarity whatsoever with that lifestyle.
No.
It's completely foreign to me. But when I'm reading the book, I've got it. I was actually sympathetic. I was fascinated by it because she has an absolute gift for recounting a story as though it's happening in real time.
Right.
You follow, you're right there. The dialogue, the back and forth, it's very lively reading.
And when she talks about working with the most wanted and how she had to, it's hard for somebody to go and speak to somebody that's child was just killed or somebody was, but she was there and had the compassion and the understanding because of everything I think she went through. She could bring that passion and that compassion to the person she was speaking with.
One of the things that I noticed in the book, has very strong emotions.
Yes.
She cries a lot in the book.
Well, that's her
She
release.
cries all day in the book.
Yeah, but
when
that's her
something bad
release.
happens, she's very much in the moment. It's very visceral for her. Oh, she's fascinating.
Right. Yes. I agree with you totally. And her way of crying is releasing the stress. Some people can turn to drinking, some smoking, or other things. She cried to release her stress. Yeah.
Well, I'm so eager to talk to Allison. She's a remarkable person. I know that many of you have seen her on TV, on a variety of different shows. I'm really excited to meet her in person.
I am too. I really am. I wish she was here in person.
I wish she
wanted her
were.
to autograph my book.
Yes. Let me first of all
Okay.
introduce Allison to Eyes on Books and our audience. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm really excited to talk to you. It's a wonderful experience.
Me too.
Thank you. I was telling a story earlier. I was going to back away from doing this review, and I said, well, before I do that, I have to at least try the book. So it's marvelous. I was so caught up early on in the book, and I have to share with you, young Allison is really very real for me.
And thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that because I had hoped that people would root for young Allison.
Right.
You know, I was always rooting for her, even when I was her.
Right.
And so that's what I really hoped. I think that a lot of kids grow up without a lot of resources, sometimes without direction. And, you know, when that happens, you have to kind of summon some inner direction. And as you know from reading it, I also imagined an imaginary cameraman over my shoulder at all times, kind of giving me supervision, I guess, or companionship or something.
Well,
but that means so much to me that you, as a man, as a dad, as somebody who, you know, grew up relatively close to that time, can relate to her struggle.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is you always followed your mother's 5 rules. And if something stuck in your head or you weren't sure, you went to rule number 3 or rule number 2. But the biggest thing is I came from a very regimented family, extremely regimented. Even though it was kind of dysfunctional, it was still regimented. And I raised my kids that way. And what I'm thinking of is if a child had to go through what you went through, nowadays, the rate of survival and achievement of any kind of goal would be extremely low, extremely low.
What does your adult self say?
To your daughters.
Well, to your daughters that you have today, but also, how does that happen? What does your adult self understand about the willingness of other people? What does it say about them? What does it say about you?
I've thought about this so much, guys, and I really appreciate you saying that because I haven't talked as much on the book tour about this, but I think that you are zeroing in on something that is vitally important, which is, you know, I relied on the kindness of friends and acquaintances and sometimes strangers.
Right.
And I couldn't have survived without them.
Right.
And I think that kind of powerful community that we have to build for ourselves often, you know, I think that sometimes people find it through their church or their synagogue or, you know, whatever. Sometimes people find it in their town. Because I was an only child of divorced parents, I had to build a family, a surrogate family for myself and a community for myself. And now as the parent of 3 teenagers, I think about these incredible other parents of my friends when I was a teenager and desperately looking for stability and sometimes housing and a roof
Right,
over my
right.
head and food, and that they took me in. I mean, that they considered me kind of a surrogate daughter, and that people fed me, and that I was always at their house and always showering and using their towels and using their washer and dryer and eating their food. And nobody ever complained about it. Just
Right.
the amount of generosity and kindness to this kind of lost teenager that they extended all of this generosity to is so amazing to me, because I know it's annoying to have your friends, your kids' friends, always coming in and like eating out of house and home,
Right,
and I
right.
did that all the time. And I didn't appreciate as a teenager what a toll it might have taken on their household. And Fran, what you were saying in terms of how I did it, I think what I've come to believe is that I was blessed with not so much a big intellect as a big hardwired ambition.
Right.
So I've wondered about this. I don't know the answer, but I do think that there might be something hardwired in our DNA about ambition, because I certainly have friends who are more talented, smarter, more charming, et cetera, than I am, and they didn't have that ambition gene.
Right.
And they were happy to get to sort of a place and stick. And I was always climbing, from the time that I was a
You were
teenager.
searching. Yep.
One thing that stands out in your life, I think, very strongly is courage. Courage, resiliency, self-reliance to a degree, but openness too. And it has to be reciprocal. In some way, what you were doing had to be reciprocal. You had to be doing something that was valuable to the people who took care of you. And you had to be able to take care of yourself, I must say, first of all.
Well, I don't think I did a very good job of it. I mean, I did whatever I had to do.
Right,
I was
right.
in survival mode.
Well,
and so
right.
I don't like sleeping in my car and, foraging in somebody's refrigerator. I mean, that's just survival,
Right.
And
It is.
I think that I built resilience over time. I don't think that I was born with it. I think that I was a pretty soft, somewhat nervous kid. And I guess part of the reason I wrote the book is because I do think you can build resiliency. I don't think that you have to be graced with it to begin with. So there's a painful scene in the book where I end up in a psychiatric ward because I've had these feelings of wanting to end it all. And I think that is very common. Okay, so part of why I wrote
Especially
it is
with the
because I
stress,
want 20
yeah.
things and teenagers to know that it's common, but also because I think that's the opposite of resilience. Wanting to end your life is the opposite of resilience. And it was after that I had to start finding other coping mechanisms rather than thinking about ending my life, and other coping mechanisms to get through pain, because, that's what resilience is finding those other avenues of strength and knowing you'll get through this.
Right. Everybody has, I find that you build a shell. Your inside can be as tender as can be, but that can't show on the outside if you have to survive. And it is very difficult to do that. And yet, when you had to go and interview parents of children that were shot, your inner self, the tenderness you had inside yourself was shown, came through, where you could interview them in a certain way where it wasn't a destructive or I'm looking for the word callous. That would be a callous way, because you had the compassion inside. You just had that outer shell that for your drive, but yet you felt it enough to go through PTSD, to cry afterwards, to feel that emotion. And to me, that is a survival mode.
One of the things that I talk about in the book, one of the, I think, symbols or motifs is masks. And so my father made masks as when I was a child, and they hung on our living room wall. And they were these really sort of creative, but I wouldn't call them happy masks. I mean, they were sort of spooky and moody and whatever his vision was. And it turns out that in life, figuratively, he was wearing a mask in terms of who he was. And I think that by going into broadcast journalism and TV news, by definition, we wear a mask because we're supposed to be a blank slate for whatever story we're hearing about. We're just a conduit. We are not supposed to, cry. We're not supposed to particularly show any bias. And so that is a mask of some kind. And part of why I wrote the book is because I did feel, particularly in these divided times, it might be helpful to just peel off the mask in this situation and say, I see you. I see you. I've been there. I feel it.
Right.
And I do credit my hard teenage years and 20-something with having some of that, having more empathy for other people.
Well, one of the things that got you into journalism in the first place, your ability to connect with people, to find people interesting in the first place, and then connect with them and engage with them. I think that's wonderful. I think you use that talent and that skill throughout your growing up years, and especially, I must say, you write wonderfully well, Allison. You're a very fine writer. No, really, I also noticed that you bring that journalism that you learned and express in your work shows up in the memoir. You bring the scenes to life. You have almost headlines and leads going into the story, and you capture the sound, the dialogue. It's wonderful. You've obviously a wonderful talent for that.
Just one more skill that I would say that comes into both is that I've always been an observer. I was an observer as a kid and as a teenager, and as a journalist, that's what you do. You show up on a scene of breaking news of some kind. I have my pen and my notebook. I'm observing what I'm seeing around me, and I do think that came in handy for writing the book. And also, when people say, how did you survive some of the dicier, dangerous situations I was in, I would say, in part, it's because I was an observer, and I wasn't the person who was always embracing the danger the way some of my friends were. I was the person who was standing back, observing it, thinking, okay, how am I going to get out of this situation? Where's the exit sign?
That's the survival mode. Now, let me ask you a question. If one of your you have twin daughters, if I'm not mistaken?
I have twin daughters and a son, so all teenagers,
Okay. Now, if one of them says, hey, Mom, I'm going on the road. I just want to experience life. What would your advice be to them?
Well, it's so funny, Fran. I thought that I was going to have more rebellious teenagers than I got because I thought that I didn't have a choice. I thought all teenagers were rebellious and risk-taking and dabbled in drugs and alcohol and had, incredibly dramatic romantic relationships like I did. I thought that was just part and parcel of being a teenager. And then because I expected them to do that, I think they're rebelling by being like great students and totally responsible. I feel like that's their rebellion. I keep saying to them, aren't you guys going to a party or something in high school? I'd be like, isn't there a party tonight? They'd be like, no. It was so confusing to me. So I've been blessed with really, really great teenagers. None of them are pushing the envelope. But if they wanted to go see live music some night in New York, I would be all for that. I embrace that level of an electric peak experience, that I was able to have so many times. I want that for them in small doses.
Right.
One of the things that you've always depended on in your life is community. Having a home and having a group of people around you that gave you that nurturing, gave you that support, and the challenges that come with it.
I can picture you moving from one end of the country to the other, and it's very difficult to adjust to that because cultures are so different.
Yeah.
In fact, when I came from New York many years ago, I was in California for 2 weeks and I wanted to go back to New York. I said, I don't like it here. And now all these years later, I'm still here. It was an adjustment. But as a teenager, it's very hard to make that adjustment, especially when you had all of your people and your strength and your roots at the other end of the country. And I can see why you made that journey back. I really could. I could feel that.
I always remind people this was before the internet. This was before cell phones.
Right.
So I couldn't even stay in touch. When my mother decided to move me when I was 15 years old from the epicenter of the universe known as Shrewsbury, New Jersey, which was my suburban town, and I considered the epicenter of my universe, 3,000 miles away across country to a place we knew no one, Bellingham, Washington.
Right,
There was
right.
no way other than letters, postal letters for me
Mm-hmm.
to keep in touch with my best friends and my extended family. So I couldn't call them on a cell phone. I couldn't see them on FaceTime. I
Right.
couldn't, I couldn't even look up the town we were going to on the internet. I had to just land there and then look around and see where I was. And the culture shock was huge.
Yep.
And it was very disorienting for me, for sure. And the thing that I've been left with, thank God, I mean, the byproduct, the wonderful gift, one of them, literally, is this aluminum popcorn tin that I've carted from place to place filled with letters.
Right.
And I had to go back through those letters when I was writing Combat Love. And the letters from my friends during that time, from New Jersey to Bellingham, and then when I moved back to New Jersey, from Bellingham to New Jersey, like the amount of love and time and care it takes to sit down and handwrite a letter, which my friends would do to update me
Right.
on what was happening back at home,
Right.
what I was missing, is so touching to me now
Right.
that I have these mementos and that they took the time. It was like a community bulletin board, it was like reporting to me on everything that was happening in their lives. So not only is it a great historical document that I used for the book, but I'm really, really just struck by the love that goes into that connection and to keeping that connection, which my friends and family did do all the time.
We have to cut this interview short. We know that you're on a special time, and we're so happy that you had time with us today.
Thank you, Allison. It's been
And
delightful.
for our readers, please pick up a copy of Combat Love. It'll really, really go right to your heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Allison.
so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.
I want to thank Allison Camarada for spending the morning with us and talking about her book, Combat Love. And go out and read the book. It's a wonderful book. You can see her life's journey and her accomplishments. She's a fabulous broadcaster, and enjoy the book as much as we did. Thank you for joining.